All right, let's take a look at that KD ratio. We are sitting at 2.151. We've climbed a little bit since the last video. Yes, I'm still playing Escalation. I'm still trying to fly a helicopter, and anybody that watched the short kind of has an idea how those flights end. But after flying 2 or 3 missions and I have a negative kill ratio, I then usually abandon those and go back to casual breakthrough, and to try to keep that KD ratio about static. It's Friday, happy Friday, and we are going to cover comments today. It's a continuation of the healthcare discussions. Hell is frozen over. We'll get into that in a moment. And also, I want to, before we get started into the rant, I want to point out that we still have merch. We've still got some cool merch. We've got the Beware the Old Gamer. These shirts are a little bit cheaper. They're from another provider, and they're a little bit cheaper, but they're also available in Europe and in Australia. So if any other English-speaking person out there that's not in the United States is interested, please leave a comment below, and I'll jump through the hoops to get them available internationally. I personally like the coffee mug. I think that coffee mug's pretty cool. I'm thinking about changing the wording to Beware the old ones instead of the old gamer. Please comment below if you like that one better, and we will get one spun up. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get the... And by the way, this is straight off the podcast. FYI, the podcast is now available through Apple Podcasts and all the other, Spotify. You don't have to do anything weird about copying and pasting the feed. Just do a search for Raging SeaBear, and my podcast is published. You can grab it. You can actually listen to the rants and share them as you will, without having to deal with the Battlefield background or gameplay. I leave that up to you. Again, some people like the gameplay, some people don't. Podcast is available for whoever doesn't like the gameplay and just wants to hear the rant. And you also bypass this introduction. So with that said, here it is, comments for January 16th. Hell freezes over. You're listening to the Raging SeaBears podcast. This podcast is for Friday, January 16th. Before we get into the comments section on this Friday's podcast, I want to encourage everybody to listen to the podcast that I am dropping on Monday. If you know a veteran or are a veteran who served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, or in the War on Terror, please listen to Monday's podcast. In fact, encourage other veterans or people who know veterans to listen on Monday. Tell everybody you can. This one will melt the internet. I'm going to answer that question. Why? Why did we fight Desert Shield, Desert Storm? And why did we invade Iraq and Afghanistan for the War on Terror when Osama bin Laden was in Pakistan? So be sure to tune in Monday. It'll drop at 8 a.m. With that public service out of the way, let's get to it. As every Friday comes along, we start answering questions or comments from our YouTube channel's comments section. So the first one this week, wait a minute, we have breaking news. Hell is frozen over. A monkey has written Shakespeare. The end of the world is nigh. Yes, believe it or not, for only the 3rd time in recorded history, I have been proven wrong on a point of fact. I know, it's hard to believe. It makes one question the order of the universe. Seriously. But every once in a while, there's a hiccup in the natural order of things. So this one comes from Milk Agitator, who writes, Raging SeaBear, your claim that no right can demand products or services from others is not correct. If a person has a right, someone else necessarily has a corresponding obligation. Many recognize rights explicitly requiring provision, often called positive rights. The right to counsel under the 6th Amendment requires the state to provide and pay for a lawyer if a defendant cannot afford one. It's also known as the Miranda rights. The right to a fair and speedy trial requires courts to supply judges, juries, facilities, and staff. The right to vote requires governments to provide ballots, polling places, election workers, registration systems, and voting infrastructure. Public education requires schools, teachers, transportation, and administration to be funded and maintained. These are all rights where a person can legitimately demand a service in order to execute the right. Even rights typically described as negative or non-interference rights still impose service obligations in practice. Free speech, property rights, due process, and the right to bear arms all require courts, enforcement, and administrative systems to exist and function. Without those institutions, the rights are not meaningfully protected or enforceable. Such rights are structurally positive and require provision, while others are structurally negative but still depends on institutional services to be real. Saying that no right can demand services collapses this distinction and does not reflect how rights actually operate in law or theory. Holy shit. The guy's right. I completely forgot about the Sixth Amendment. You have the right to counsel. If you cannot afford one, one will be provided to you by the courts. However, after that point, he kind of fell off the rails. While I will capitulate that state or federal services may be required for law enforcement or judicial enforcement, I still claim, and will continue to claim until proven otherwise, that services or public services being provided by non-governmental entities, such as doctors, nurses, hospitals, fall outside this response/argument and is therefore not a right. Now, digging into his comment a little deeper, he mentions education, he mentions transportation, he mentions free speech, which of course requires no service obligation. You open your mouth and a sound comes out, and I'll get into this a little bit more in a second. He mentions property rights, gun ownership, health care. Okay, so I'm going to touch on each of these real quick. First off, education is not a right. Now, it can be argued that it's to the societal's benefit that we have a well-educated population. I can argue that we've been falling down on that pretty hard in recent years. But it's not a right. And the fact that the Supreme Court ruled against Biden paying off student loans reinforces the fact that an education is not a right. Transportation is also not a right, other than the fact that our founding documents does say that you can travel between states without papers. It doesn't say how, because if the founding fathers had mentioned how, such as you have the right to travel between states on a horse, well, then they would then obligate the federal government into buying everybody a horse. So there's no mention of the means of travel. So therefore, your legs and whatever transportation you can come up with on your own can be used. But there is no service obligation or no obligation for you to exercise your right to travel. People argue that driver's licenses are a right. That's not true. It's a privilege that can be taken away if you abuse that privilege, such as drunk driving. He also mentions, let's see, what else? Property rights, those are defined in founding documents. Right to bear arms. This gets a little fuzzy, and while you could argue that the background checks are unconstitutional in violation of the Second Amendment, the real fact of the matter is that you can walk into any store that sells black powder firearms or go online and buy black powder firearms without any background check or paperwork. You buy it, you pick it up, you walk out of the store, or they'll even mail it to you if you do it mail order. But that's only for black powder weapons and does not extend to more modern firearms. Again, there can be an argument that could be pushed before SCOTUS for an opinion on this, but the fact of the matter is you can pick up a boomstick without any paperwork or government intervention. With that said, he did not stipulate regarding anything regarding products, so my argument about products still stands. With that said, I still stand by my position that healthcare is not a right. And let me clarify that I'm not saying that people should not have access to quality health care. What I'm saying is that it is not a right that can lay the burden of the cost at the people's feet by declaring it a right, thereby provided by the federal government. I have a problem with paying for other people's stupidity. If people want to smoke or vape and they develop lung conditions, I should not be on the hook for their decision to put something in their mouth and suck. For the same reason, I don't feel that I should be on the financial hook for someone who decides to shove 3 Big Macs down their gullet and wash it down with a Coca-Cola the size of the Tennessee Valley Irrigation Project, and then have me pay for their diabetes treatment. No, just no. And I'm not even going to go down the rat hole of transgender treatment, where you cut off parts, take pieces of rectum, and try to make a hoo-ha out of it. Or trying to enlarge a clitoris into a penis. I'm sorry, people, it doesn't work. Let alone the millions of dollars you're going to be taking in drugs for the rest of your life and be just as miserable as you are now. They need to just grow up and accept who and what they are and move on in life. But don't demand that I pay for it under some pretense that health care is your right, that you have the right to mutilate your body, or worse, that of a small child, and expect me to pay for it. Therefore, I will continue to stand that health care is not a right, but everyone should have access to quality health care at a reasonable cost. And the final thing I'm going to say on health care actually comes from another comment from Whackmain5339, who says in the comment section, as a European, Spain, I'm wishing our public health care gets deleted. It takes me a month to see my doctor. By the time it is my date, whatever issue I had ain't an issue no more. I'm sick and tired of getting half my paycheck stolen, so a gazillion immigrants who don't pay any taxes get free health care and free meds. I'm a pharmacy technician, and I literally see every day how our elders have to pay for meds, but immigrants and people who refuse to work get everything for free. Give me my full paycheck and I'll get private insurance. Thank you. No, thank you, Whackman5339. That's my point, and he makes it perfectly from a eyewitness experiencing it in Europe. Now, I do need to circle back on the freedom of speech, and I'm seriously thinking about doing a rant on the First Amendment, because right now there are people that are abusing the shit out of that. Freedom of speech, open your mouth and words come out. However, you cannot say things that will incite action or violence. For instance, if you are in a crowded theater and you scream fire, the words coming out of your mouth will incite action from others, as in a panic to get out, and could lead to other people getting hurt. You may also not incite a riot where other people can get hurt. The basic premise here is that you have a lot of rights, but those rights end where other people's rights begin. I'm not talking about feelings. Don't tell me that your feelings trump my rights. You're going to be in for a hell of a debate, and you're going to lose. But you have a lot of rights, and those rights end where you inflict harm upon others. If you say something that brings harm to others, you can be held liable or slanderous, depending on how you do it. If you use your right to bear arms to bring harm to others just unjustifiably, meaning you're not defending yourself, then again, you are then subject to judicial action, which was pointed out is a service provided by the federal and state and county and city governments. And for the wokies in the crowd, when I say harm, I mean evidentiary harm. Physical harm, black eyes, broken bones, damaged property, defamation of character that can be proven, someone's net worth dropping because of things being said, or harm to businesses where their sales plummet because of action taken by you. This is harm. Harm to feelings don't count. I don't care if your feelings get hurt. Grow some thicker skin. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Start reciting it. Say it before you go to sleep after prayers. Maybe the world would become a better place if you people just grow some thicker skin and stop being offended at everything. Oh, by the way, circling back on that, libraries was mentioned by another guy as a right. Emergency responders, those services are provided and justified by city, county, state laws and or constitutions, not the federal government constitution or the federal constitution, and none of those may supersede the U.S. Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. Period. So I hope that addresses that. I like I said, good job. It is rare that I am ever caught flat-footed, and well done. Now, to all of those guys and gals who called me dumb, called me ignorant, called me whatever, and then failed to be able to provide counterpoints to my arguments, but rather resulted to name-calling, well, name-calling is the last resort of a limited mind. Anybody who calls me dumb, I can prove otherwise. Anyone who calls me ignorant, I can provide facts that I expect, counter facts or facts to discredit my evidence. Name calling doesn't do shit except tell me that you live in mommy's basement sucking on a Twinkie and never had a quality education outside of art history, French art history, underwater fire prevention, indoor skydiving, gender studies, or gym. In particular, Mr. G-Tube Dude. Mr. G-Tube Dude, you indicated in your response that you are attending university. I would suggest you go to the finance office and demand a refund. You're getting ripped off. And to Warm Slippers 9520, who said, "You are dumb, LOL." Dude, if stupid were painful, you'd be writhing on the ground. The last comment I'm going to respond to is to a guy named MeMan24. He's arguing that basically we spent money on stupid things like wars rather than a healthier society. The argument on wars, I would suggest that you tune in on Monday. That's going to be one that might melt the internet. And the other one particular comment that he responded, he says, "We already have socialism in the USA. Ever heard of a library? How about a national park? How about, a freeway? Are these concepts familiar to you?" First off, condescension does not become you. I don't think you have the IQ to pull it off. First off, libraries outside of the Library of Congress are not federal, nor are they a right. They are city, county, and state, which falls within city, county, and state's obligations to the populace as determined by local ordinances, laws, or state constitutions. National parks were founded by Teddy Roosevelt, and the entire Roosevelt family was socialist. Don't even get me started on FDR and his New Deal. Personally, I think all the national parks should either be given to the states or sold, and the proceeds go to paying off our national debt. And lastly, freeways. Freeways were created by Dwight D. Eisenhower for national defense. In the 1950s, we feared an invasion by the Russians. That's why our freeways were built in order to move troops across the country as necessary without relying on trains. And also, in case you didn't know, I don't remember how many miles, but every 5-10 miles of freeway, there is a stretch of freeway that's at least 1 mile long, so that it can be used as an emergency runway for our aircraft. So not one thing that you mentioned is a right, nor do they provide for a healthier society. In fact, it can be argued that freeways do more harm to society than anything else you mentioned, because thanks to the Teamsters, and by the way, if there's a Teamster listening, I still love you guys. Please don't hurt me. They use trucks to transport goods across the states rather than using the rail. The way it should ideally work in order to save, quote unquote, the environment, right? Greenhouse gas emissions. This is what the left argues for. So by that argument, the freeways are actually more damning to our environment than, quote unquote, being healthy for society. Goods should be unloaded at the docks and loaded straight onto train cars, and then trains transported to the cities, and the truck should then deliver from the train yards to the warehouses or the stores within that given city. Hello, simple logic. A single train in the United States can carry up to 560 TEUs when fully loaded with double-stack containers. That's 560 trucks that can be taken off the freeways, thereby reducing the carbon emissions that get you tree-hugging frog lickers' panties in a twist. So if you really want to, argue freeways, you're arguing on the wrong side there, me man 24. So with that said, we're staring at about 18 minutes. So if you're on YouTube, please like, share, and comment. If you're listening on podcasts, I ask that you please share with others. So that's it for this week. This is SeaBear, out.